I wasn't born to be cuddled or rocked to sleep in someone's lap. From the start, I learned how to go quiet when I was starving, how to stay still in the cold rain, and how not to flinch when a man yelled. I didn't know what I was waiting for, not until the first pair of eyes looked at me, not to test me, but to save me. I never asked for much. A patch of grass, a quiet place to sleep, maybe a hand on my back that didn't tremble with fear or command with urgency. Some dogs are born to chase balls. Others, like me, are born into noise, into orders barked louder than the gunfire we ran into. But even a warrior like me, Chase, former K-9 of Union County SWAT, found himself longing for something I didn't have a name for. Not glory, not duty, just peace. I met Frank on a cold morning in early spring, the kind where the ground is still wet from the thaw and the air smells like new beginnings, if you're willing to believe in that sort of thing. I wasn't, not yet. Frank wasn't much to look at. Wiry frame, clothes too big, eyes covered with dark glasses that didn't hide the fact he didn't see a damn thing. But when he reached out and touched my snout, he didn't hesitate, and I didn't flinch. We were both tired in our own ways, and somehow that made us fit. The folks at the shelter said I was too intense for regular adoption. Chase has a switch, they said. He's loyal, sure, but he's always watching, always calculating. They weren't wrong. Years on the force taught me that hesitation could get someone killed, so I didn't hesitate. I read body language better than any man could read a book. I could smell anger before a voice rose. I could feel fear before the shaking started. That kind of knowing. It doesn't just go away because they pin a retired badge on your collar. But Frank didn't flinch. Not when I stared. Not when I circled. Not even when I sat, ears up, and waited to see if he'd keep talking or walk away like the others. He just smiled and said, "You're not going to scare me off, big guy. I've been blind longer than you've been angry." So, we went home. His home. Our home, eventually. Asheville was quiet, at least most days. Our apartment sat above a bookstore that always smelled like cedar and old pages. Frank read Braille at night, fingers moving with grace I couldn't understand. He talked to me like I was a roommate, not a dog. Told me about the books, about the stories he imagined as he felt the dots. I listened. I always did. My hearing had saved more than one life. His voice, it started to save mine. We had a routine. Mornings meant the sidewalk cafe on Maple and Fifth. Frank always ordered the same thing. Black coffee, 2 sugars. I got a biscuit and a bowl of cold water. Folks knew us. "Morning, Frank," they'd call. "Hey there, Chase," some would say, leaning over to scratch behind my ear, though most knew better than to do it without asking. I wasn't mean, just cautious. Frank liked the sun. Even if he couldn't see it, he said he could feel it on his skin. I liked the quiet hum of the town, the delivery trucks, the morning chatter, the birds that always seemed to know which wires to perch on. It was calm. It was unfamiliar, because calm doesn't last, not in my world. That morning, I felt it before I heard it, the tension in the air, like static before a storm. A low rumble, 3 of them, tearing through the quiet with the kind of arrogance only engines and men full of themselves can make. Motorcycles. They pulled up fast, parked without care, engines growling like wolves marking territory. I didn't need to see them. I could smell it. Oil, leather, sweat, and something sour. Ego. Frank sipped his coffee. I sat straighter. 3 men. 2 were just noise. The third, he was trouble. Big frame, shaved head, too many rings on too many fingers. The kind of man who made his friends laugh too loud and looked too long at things he didn't understand. He saw me and smiled like he'd found something to poke with a stick. I didn't move, didn't blink, but I watched him. Every step, every twitch. My ears picked up the shift in his weight, the way his boots landed heavy on the sidewalk, like he wanted the ground to remember him. Frank leaned forward slightly, as he always did when the world around him changed in ways he couldn't see. "Everything all right, buddy?" he asked, calm voice, hand brushing the side of my neck. I didn't answer, not with sound, just shifted closer. I didn't like the way the man was looking at Frank. "That's a big dog," the man said, standing just close enough to be inappropriate. "He bite?" Frank gave a small smile. "Not unless someone gives him a reason." The man chuckled, but it wasn't warm. "Looks like he thinks he's smarter than me." He bent slightly, moving his hand like he might touch me. I didn't growl. Not yet, just stared. My posture said what needed saying. "You're 2 inches from a decision you won't walk away from." His friends chuckled behind him, already losing interest. But he wasn't. He stepped back, finally, like he'd passed some little test of nerve. But I knew men like him. The ones who don't let things go, who don't like being ignored by anyone, let alone a dog. Frank sipped his coffee. "You okay, Chase?" I didn't answer. He finished his cup slowly, the way he always did, savoring the heat. The man lingered. So did I. Even as Frank stood, folding his cane and placing a tip of it against the concrete to orient himself, I didn't turn my back. The man was quiet now. Too quiet. We walked away, but I could feel his eyes on us, like a tick you hadn't pulled off yet. Later that day, Frank laughed about the encounter. "He thought he could size you up, didn't he? That guy didn't have a clue." I wish I could have told him. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And me? I'd been asleep too long. The soldier in me was waking up. I remember the clink of the spoon in Frank's cup the next morning, the way he stirred his coffee 3 times, clockwise, then tapped the side once, always the same rhythm. It was his way of measuring time in a world without light. To most, it might have seemed like a quiet, ordinary start to a day. But to me, the air was different, tighter, still. We walked the same path we always did, down Maple Street with the cracked sidewalks and the newspaper stand that still carried real paper, not just QR codes. The same woman was watering her plants in front of her bakery. Same kid racing by on his scooter, wheels squealing slightly as he took the corner too fast. But my paws hit the pavement just a little harder. My steps were slower. My head turned more often than usual. Frank noticed. "You're twitchy this morning, Chase," he said, using his cane to tap out the curb ahead of us. "What's got your fur in a twist?" I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't know how to explain a scent, a memory, a presence that hadn't yet revealed itself. I couldn't point and bark and say, "That man yesterday, he wasn't just passing through." But I felt it, the way a bird feels the pressure shift before a storm. The cafe was quiet when we arrived. Only a few early risers today. Hank, the old Vietnam vet, who always wore the same worn ball cap, nodded to Frank. I gave him a look, and he gave me a slow blink back, the kind of mutual respect between 2 creatures who'd seen too much. Frank sat in our usual spot, 3rd table from the corner, beneath the big oak that offered shade even on the brightest mornings. I laid beside him, ears up, but head down, pretending to relax. Pretending. That was something I was getting good at. We were halfway through our morning routine, coffee for Frank, water, and a biscuit for me, when I heard it. The rumble. Low and distant at first, like a bear waking up deep in the woods, then louder, closer, familiar, and unwanted. 3 bikes, same engines, same rhythm. I lifted my head, ears shifting like radar. Frank felt it. He always did. Again? He said softly, more to himself than to me. Well, maybe it's just coincidence. It wasn't. The bikes pulled into the lot across the street, parking like they owned it. And maybe they thought they did. Travis stepped off first. Same cocky gait. Same eyes scanning the space for attention, like a spotlight looking for trouble to shine on. He didn't see me yet, but I saw him. I didn't growl. Not yet. But my front paws stiffened, claws instinctively digging into the cracks between the concrete. Frank sipped his coffee. "Let's not make a fuss today, buddy." I heard the others laughing. One of them made some joke I didn't catch, but the tone was enough. Travis elbowed one of them, nodded toward our table. And then, of course, he came over. "Morning," he said, too loud, too smooth. "Didn't think we'd run into each other again so soon." Frank tilted his head, confused. "Do I know you?" Travis chuckled. "I was here yesterday. You had the big dog with you." Frank smiled politely. "Ah, yes. That would be Chase." Travis squatted a little, bringing himself closer to me, but not quite close enough to touch. "Chase. That's a military name, right?" "Fitting. He looks like he's been through war." I didn't blink, just stared. He kept talking. "You sure he's safe to be around people? He's got that edge." Frank's smile faltered slightly. "He's trained, and he's my eyes. He's never given me a reason to doubt him." Travis's lips twisted, just a little. Well, maybe he needs to be reminded who's in charge. It was quiet, just loud enough for me to hear. I shifted. My tail tapped once against Frank's boot. Frank leaned down, resting his hand on my head. "Easy now." But Travis wasn't done. He reached out, not to pet me, but to poke. Just a finger, extended toward my snout. I didn't move, but my lips tightened. No teeth. Just tension. "Careful," Frank warned, voice calm, but clear. "He doesn't like being touched unless he knows you." Travis's hand paused midair. His pride wanted to finish what he started, but somewhere in that thick skull, a scrap of instinct told him not to. He pulled back. "Whatever," he muttered, standing. "He's just a dog." He turned back to his friends, laughing again, louder this time. The kind of laugh that's meant to cover up embarrassment. Frank stirred his coffee again. "He's not just a dog," he whispered, almost like he didn't mean for me to hear it. But I did. I always do. The rest of the morning dragged. I didn't take my eyes off them. I knew better. I'd seen situations like this play out before, in back alleys, in raids gone bad, in homes that smelled like fear and blood and regret. Men like Travis don't just go away. They escalate. Eventually the bikers left. Tires squealed, engines roared, and the cafe exhaled. So did Frank. "Let's get out of here, boy," he said, standing slowly, gathering his cane. I walked close, too close, my shoulder brushing his knee with every step. At home, Frank didn't say much. He turned on the radio, the old one that only got 2 stations, but had the kind of warm hum he liked. I laid near the door. Hours passed. Light shifted on the floorboards. The radio played an old jazz record, something from before I was even born. Frank cooked dinner, Pasta with canned sauce. I didn't eat, just watched the hallway through the crack under the door. That night, as Frank brushed his teeth and talked about something he read in a Braille magazine, I stayed silent, because I knew Travis would be back. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but men like that never back down. And dogs like me, we don't forget. There's a kind of silence that settles into your bones, the kind that doesn't come from quiet, but from waiting, from knowing something is coming and not being able to stop it. That's the silence that wrapped around me the next morning. Frank, like always, moved through the house with gentle steps. He sang to himself while getting dressed, some old country tune he only ever remembered the chorus to. He asked me if I wanted to go to the cafe like usual. I didn't answer, just stood by the door, stiff, watching. "I take it that's a yes," he chuckled. It wasn't, but I went anyway. The sun was out, but it didn't feel warm. Not to me. The shadows stretched longer than they should have, and every corner we passed felt like it held a breath waiting to be released. At the cafe, the regulars were there. Hank waved his usual two-finger salute. Marnie from the florist's shop brought over a bowl of water for me without being asked. It was her way of showing care, never touching me, just setting the bowl down like a peace offering. Frank ordered his coffee, sat down with a satisfied sigh like this morning could be any other morning. And for a minute, I let myself believe it might be, until I heard it, that laugh. It wasn't loud, not at first, but it cut through the noise of the street like a knife through twine. I turned my head before I even processed it. My ears had already locked in. Travis, he was back, leaning against a post across the street, smoking something cheap and smirking like the world owed him respect. He wasn't alone. The other two were there, and a new one, taller, thinner, with eyes that darted around like he didn't trust anything, not even his own thoughts. Frank didn't notice, not yet. I tensed, muscles pulling tight under my coat. I didn't bark. That wasn't my way. Barking was for show. I didn't need to show. Travis pushed off the post and crossed the street like it belonged to him. No urgency, no hesitation. His boots clapped the pavement, and each step made something colder settle in my chest. "Well, well," he said, voice dipped in sarcasm. "Ain't this a cozy little setup?" Frank looked up, smiled politely. "Oh, you again." "Still got your bodyguard with you," Travis added, nodding at me. "That mutt ever let you take a walk on your own?" Frank's smile faded just a little. "He's not a mutt, and he's not just a bodyguard." "Oh, I know," Travis said, chuckling. "He's a good boy, a real soldier. Ain't that right, big guy?" He crouched slightly, too far to touch me, but close enough for his voice to slip into my ears like oil under a doorframe. I didn't flinch, just kept my eyes on his throat, not out of malice, just calculation. "You know," he continued, glancing at his buddies who were starting to snicker, "I read somewhere that dogs can sense a person's true character." "That true?" Frank shifted in his chair. I felt his hand graze my shoulder, light but deliberate. "Some dogs can," he replied, "especially the ones who've seen more than most people." Travis grinned wide, teeth flashing. "Well, guess we'll find out what he thinks of me, huh?" He stepped closer. Now I growled. It wasn't loud, just a deep vibration from my chest that made the air feel heavier. The kind of sound that says, "Not one more step." The cafe fell quiet. Conversations halted. Even Hank lowered his paper. Frank reached down, resting his hand on my back. "Chase," he said softly. "Easy." But I wasn't the one causing trouble. Travis raised both hands in mock surrender. "Whoa there, boy. Just playing around." His friends laughed again, this time with that sharp edge that meant it wasn't about the joke anymore. It was about control, about ego. And the way they looked at Frank, like they were waiting for him to shrink back, to apologize for my reaction, it boiled something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, purpose. "He doesn't like it when people come on too strong," Frank said calmly. Maybe that's what spooked him. Travis tilted his head, mock puzzled. Spooked? Nah, I think he's just tense. All that training, you know. Dogs like that, they need to be reminded who's boss. I shifted, just slightly, not toward him, not away, just enough for him to feel the weight of my stare. He didn't like it, but he wasn't going to back down in front of his friends. He glanced around, saw the people watching, the phones raised now, subtle but present. That made him hesitate, for a breath. Then he made his move. He stepped forward and lightly tapped the leg of Frank's chair with his boot. A stupid, careless act. It didn't hurt Frank, but it didn't need to. He touched what belonged to me. In a blink, I was up, not lunging, not attacking, just standing, between them, my body firm, planted, my growl turned sharper, louder, not for the show, for the line he'd just crossed. Frank didn't speak. He just tightened his grip on my leash. Travis laughed, but it was hollow now. "Y'all are really gonna let a dog tell you what to do?" one of his friends called out, chuckling nervously. The girl behind the counter stepped out. Her apron still had flour on it. "Leave, now," she said, her voice shaking with courage. Travis looked at her, then at me, then back at the crowd that had gathered, quiet but united. And finally, he took a step back. "Relax," he muttered. "It's just a damn dog." He turned, stalked off, the others following, their laughter fading into the roar of their bikes starting up. But even as they pulled away, I didn't move, not until I couldn't hear the engines anymore. Frank let out a breath he'd been holding. "You okay, Chase?" he asked, voice low, worn. I sat back down, slowly, my breathing steady, but not relaxed, because I wasn't okay. Not really. Something in me had clicked back into place, something that had been sleeping. And I knew now, this wasn't over, not even close. There's something about silence after conflict that's different from the silence before it. Before, the quiet holds a question. After, it holds a weight. That afternoon, Frank and I walked home in that kind of silence, the kind that settles deep in the bones. He didn't say much, just held my leash a little tighter than usual. His steps were steady, but I could feel the uncertainty in them, like he wasn't sure if the world around him had shifted or if it was just something in me. And something had shifted. Not on the outside, no. The town still looked the same. Old brick storefronts, green awnings faded from the sun, sidewalks lined with potted flowers and weathered benches. But inside me, the old gears had started to turn again. When we got to the apartment, Frank unlocked the door with the same careful routine, 2 fingers to guide the key, a twist, a push with his shoulder. He let me go in first, as always. I paused on the threshold, scanning the hallway. No scent, no sound, but my gut didn't ease. He hung his coat on the same hook, kicked off his shoes in the same spot, and made his way to the kitchen. I didn't follow. I sat by the door, watching, listening. "You're back on duty, huh?" Frank called over his shoulder, the smile in his voice a little forced. "Figured today would rattle you." He filled a bowl with water and set it down. I didn't move. "Okay," he said, quieter this time. "I get it." He made tea, the kind with peppermint. It always helped his headaches. But today, he didn't drink it. Just held the mug in both hands and sat in the armchair by the window. "You know," he said after a while. "When I got you, they told me you might have some leftover instincts, like muscle memory, but in your head." I tilted my head slightly, watching him from across the room. I guess I didn't realize how close to the surface it still was. He set the mug down, rubbed his face with both hands. "Can't say I blame you. That guy, Travis, he's got that sound in his voice. The kind that makes your spine itch." He paused. "I can't see him, Chase. But you can, and that matters." It wasn't much, but it was enough. I walked over, slow, deliberate, and laid my head on his knee. He scratched behind my ear, and for a moment, things felt normal again. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Not deeply, anyway. I stayed near the door. My ears twitched at every creak, every wind gust brushing the window panes. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The real test came the next morning. Frank was hesitant about going out. I could feel it in the way he held the leash, in the pause before we stepped outside. But routine has a pull of its own, and the world hadn't officially changed yet. We took our normal route. The streets were calm. The same bakery smells floated on the air, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At the cafe, Frank hesitated at the door. "You sure about this, bud?" he asked. I pressed forward, gently nudging his leg. Not because I felt safe, but because I needed to know. We sat in our usual spot. The girl behind the counter gave us a smile, but there was worry in her eyes. She didn't say it, but I could tell. She remembered yesterday, too. Frank sipped his coffee in silence. Then came the laugh. Not Travis this time. One of the others, the thinner one, with the nervous eyes. He was standing near the paper stand, pretending to read the front page, but watching us through the corner of his eye. I stayed seated. Frank stiffened. He could sense something was off. "Someone's there, huh?" he whispered. I gave a low grunt, not a growl, just a breath with weight. The man didn't approach. He just lingered, staring. Then he spat on the ground and walked off, slow, like he wanted me to see him leave. I did, every step. Frank let out a long sigh. "This isn't over, is it?" No, it wasn't. That night, Frank locked the windows for the first time since I'd known him. He even pushed the dresser a few inches in front of the door. "I know you've got me," he said, "but I can't pretend this town is what it used to be. Not anymore." I stayed near the window. I didn't bark. I didn't whine. I just watched the shadows stretch across the floor, waiting for one of them to move the wrong way. Around midnight, I heard something. Not a voice. Not a step. A scrape. Metal on metal. The fire escape. I didn't move. Not at first. I waited. There it was again. Frank stirred in the bedroom. "Chase," he called, voice groggy. I padded to the door, muscles tight. I positioned myself between him and the sound. I could smell it now. Motor oil, damp denim, cigarette breath. He was outside. Frank appeared behind me in his robe, holding his phone. "Should I call?" I didn't respond. Then came the knock. Soft. Deliberate. Frank jumped. The voice on the other side was muffled, but I knew it. "Relax, man. It's just me, Travis." My lips peeled back over my teeth. No sound, just the air vibrating in my chest. Frank raised the phone, his hand shaking. "I'm calling the cops." There was a pause outside, then laughter, short, cruel. "Come on, man," Travis said. "Don't be like that. No hard feelings, right? Frank didn't answer. He was waiting on the line. Me? I was waiting for the door to open. But it didn't. Eventually, the footsteps faded. I stayed by the door for hours after that. The test hadn't come yet. But it was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to let him make the first move. There's a moment just before something snaps when everything goes still. Back in the service, that moment usually came just before we breached a door. 1 second, you're stacked up, waiting for the go order, heart steady but alert, breath shallow. Then, bang, the world explodes. But it's that quiet second, right before, that always stayed with me. A second full of knowing, of inevitability. That second had returned to my life. But this time, it wasn't on a battlefield. It was in our home. Frank started sleeping with the phone on his chest. His breathing at night came heavier, with small shifts beneath the blanket that told me his mind wasn't resting even if his body tried. I slept by the front door, like I had back in the unit, alert, still, my ear tilted toward every creak of wood or gust of wind pressing against the building. 3 nights passed with nothing more than silence and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. But I knew Travis wasn't done. His knock wasn't a goodbye. It was a whisper. I'm still out here. That morning, Frank didn't ask if I wanted to go to the cafe. He just stood by the door, leash in one hand, coffee thermos in the other. I could use fresh air, he said softly, but we'll keep it short. Just a walk. No sitting down today. I pressed my head into his leg, not out of agreement, just presence, telling him, if you go, I go. We stepped out into a day that pretended to be normal. Blue sky, crisp breeze, birds hopping across the wires. But my instincts, those deep buried reflexes honed over years of service, told me otherwise. My nose twitched at scents that shouldn't be there. Smoke where there was no grill, rubber where there was no car. Frank didn't smell that. He only had my attention to go on, and he trusted it. Let's take the side street today, buddy, he said. We veered off the main drag, past the alley behind the bakery, past the thrift shop that always smelled like dust and lavender. My paws moved silent on the cracked concrete. Every window felt like a pair of watching eyes. We didn't get far before I heard the bikes. 2 of them this time. No roaring entrance. No blaring engines. They were idling, close, waiting. I stopped. Frank felt the tension snap through the leash. You see something? I didn't move. Then laughter. Familiar. Hollow. Like a man trying too hard to seem in control. Frank turned slightly toward the sound. Is it him? I growled low. Not enough to echo. Just enough for Frank to hear in his chest. From the alley they stepped out. Travis, of course. And the lanky one, Deacon. I'd come to learn. Morning, Travis said with mock cheer. Out for a stroll? Frank stood still. We're not looking for trouble. Neither are we, Travis replied. Just wanted to say hello to my favorite pooch. He took a step forward. I stepped in front of Frank. He smirked. Always on duty, huh? Frank's voice didn't shake. Whatever you think this is, it's not worth it. Travis didn't answer right away. He looked around, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Then he reached down and tapped a chair someone had left near the alley wall. Just a little nudge, like a kid kicking a stone. It clanged against a trash bin, loud, sharp. Reflexes don't care about context. I was up in a flash, body coiled, blocking Frank completely. No bark, just presence. Teeth bared, not to attack, but to warn. That was the second, the tense second. The one before something breaks. Travis froze. Frank spoke behind me. "You need to walk away." The silence thickened. Then, a door nearby opened. An older woman peeked out from her porch. Her eyes landed on the scene. She didn't say anything. But her presence changed things. Travis's jaw twitched. "Just kidding, man. You're too sensitive." He turned, but not all the way. Looked at me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Next time, mutt." Then they were gone. Back into the alley. The silence stayed a few moments longer. Frank exhaled. "Come on. Let's get home." We walked faster than usual. His hand on the leash was white-knuckled now. That evening, Frank called Officer Nolan, one of the few good ones left in town, a man who respected what I was and what I had been. "We had another run-in," Frank said on the phone. "They're trying to provoke him, and I don't know what to do when it finally pushes him too far." Officer Nolan came by, sat on our couch, drank the bad instant coffee Frank offered him, watched me the whole time. "He's not the problem," Nolan finally said. "That dog's done more for this town than those boys ever will. But if it comes down to it, and he defends you, people need to see it for what it is." Frank nodded slowly. "How do we make sure of that?" Nolan looked at me. "Keep your doors locked. Keep your head down, and when the time comes, let him do what he was trained to do." That night, I didn't sleep at the door. I slept at the foot of Frank's bed, closer. I knew now that the second before the break was almost over. And whatever came next, I had to be ready. You'd think coming home would bring comfort. A couch that smells like old leather and sunshine. The creak of the second stair, even though we don't have a second floor. The way Frank hums under his breath when he hangs up his coat. Something old and tuneless, but his. That kind of comfort's a rare thing. But comfort only lives where peace does. And lately, peace had stopped showing up. After Travis and that Deacon kid cornered us in the alley, something in Frank changed. He still moved through the world like he trusted it. But I could feel his pulse beat faster at every unexpected sound. He'd tilt his head slightly more often, like trying to catch something in the air. And when he reached for my leash in the morning, his fingers lingered just a bit longer on the clip, like asking permission. We didn't go back to the cafe after that, not even for takeout. Frank started brewing coffee at home again. Same 2 sugars, different silence. I spent more time at the windows. They were high and narrow, not made for looking out, but I'd learned how to perch just right on the radiator to keep an eye on the street. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, above an old record store that hadn't played music since the owner passed away last spring. No one had taken over the space, just dust and silence and faded posters in the window. Every time a motorcycle passed, my ears perked, before my eyes confirmed it wasn't them. Every time the front door downstairs creaked, my tail went stiff. I didn't rest. Not really. I couldn't. Frank noticed. He always notices. "You haven't relaxed in days, buddy," he said one night, sitting cross-legged on the floor next to me. He ran his hand gently over my back, fingers brushing the scars beneath my coat. "It's like you're back in a war zone." I laid my head on his leg. He smelled like black tea and old cotton, and something else, anxiety held deep in the chest. "I wish I could see what you see," he whispered. "Or maybe I don't." He didn't say it like a joke. He said it like a man standing in a room full of shadows, He could feel but never name. That night, he locked every window, bolted the door. He even dragged the old dresser in front of it, not because he thought it would stop anyone, but because he needed to feel like he was doing something. It was late. Past midnight. The street outside had quieted to nothing but the occasional gust of wind. I lay by the door, listening to the way it groaned in its frame. Frank had fallen asleep on the couch, with the radio murmuring something about a storm front moving in from the west. And then I heard it. A footstep. Not up close, not loud, but wrong. Wrong placement. Wrong rhythm. Someone was moving around the building. I stood slowly, paused silent on the floorboards. Then a scrape. Metal on concrete. The back fire escape. I moved to the window, low and careful. Through the corner of the glass, I caught a shape. Just a shadow, passing along the alley below. Then another. They were circling. Frank stirred on the couch. I padded over and pressed my nose to his wrist. He woke fast, instinct kicking in. "What is it?" he asked, already reaching for the phone. I didn't bark, just stood by the door, staring at it, willing it to stay closed. He dialed with quick fingers, spoke in a voice that tried to be calm, but cracked on the edges. The dispatcher knew him by name. Promised to send a car. We waited. The next noise came from the back window. A soft tap, like something brushing the glass. Frank turned toward it. What was that? Then a louder sound, metal scraping the pane. He stood, backing toward the hallway. I moved with him, always between him and the sound. My growl came slow and deep. The window creaked, then went quiet. Then a soft curse outside. Frank jumped. They were here. He reached for the bat by the door. He kept it more for nostalgia than protection. It had been his son's, back when the boy was still visiting. But tonight, it felt like something solid to hold. The sirens came not long after. Flashing red and blue lights bounced across the ceiling. The footsteps outside retreated fast, crunching gravel and scattering down the alley. When the officers knocked, Frank didn't answer right away. "It's the police," one of them called. Frank opened the door slowly. I stayed close, watching their hands, reading their faces. Officer Nolan was there. His partner, new, young, eyes too wide. "They're gone," Nolan said. "We found some fresh prints in the alley. Looks like 2 of them. Can't say for sure if it's your guy, but it's him," Frank said, voice quiet. He tapped on the window. Nolan sighed. "You want to file a report?" Frank hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet. He hasn't done anything. But he will," I thought. Nolan looked at me. "Your dog knew before we did." Again. Frank nodded. "He always does." The officers left. Frank closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it like the weight of the whole building had shifted onto his back. "I don't know what they want, Chase," he murmured, "but I know they haven't finished." I lay down beside the door again. I didn't blink for a long time. Some dogs dream of chasing rabbits. I dream of standing between danger and the ones I love. And I was wide awake. There's something sacred about the early morning hours. That stretch of stillness between night and dawn, when the world forgets its noise for just a little while. It used to be my favorite time. Before all this, before Travis, before the feeling that peace was something we'd already used up. But that morning, the quiet didn't comfort me. It warned me. Frank had fallen asleep in his chair again. his head tilted back, mouth slightly open. His breathing was deep but uneven, like even in his sleep, his body didn't trust the silence. I sat near the door, as always, my back straight, ears forward. That night on the fire escape had left its mark, not just on me, but on Frank too. He was different now, not broken, but bruised in a place you couldn't see. I knew that kind of wound. The sky was just starting to turn that pale blue, the kind that promises light but hasn't made good on it yet. I heard it before I saw anything. A low hum, like a motorcycle idling a block away. Then another. Then it stopped. The hair on my neck rose. A few minutes later it came. The knock. 3 slow taps. Frank stirred but didn't wake. I stood, walked softly to the door, nose close to the floor. I could smell the leather, the sweat, the cheap cigarettes, and something new. Gasoline. Faint, but present. I let out a low growl. Frank blinked awake. "What is it, boy?" Another knock. This one louder. Then a voice. "It's me, Travis." Frank sat up straighter. What the hell does he want? He moved to the door, kept his voice even. "What do you want, Travis?" "Relax," the voice said through the wood. "Just came to talk. No hard feelings." Frank didn't answer right away. He looked down at me, like I might say something. I held his gaze. "No, thank you," he said finally. "You should leave." "Aw, come on, man. I was just messing around before. Don't tell me your mutt's still holding a grudge." Frank took a step back. His hand brushed the edge of the baseball bat we kept leaning against the wall. "If you don't go, I'll call the police." A pause. Then a laugh. "Yeah, that worked real well last time." I growled again, louder now. Frank gripped the bat, but his voice stayed steady. "This is your last warning." Footsteps shuffled outside, not leaving, just pacing. Then Travis again, closer this time. "You always hide behind the dog. Or is he the one really in charge?" Frank's lips tightened. I could feel the anger in him, but I could also feel the fear. Not for himself, for me. I moved between him and the door, pressed my body against his legs. He reached down, placed a hand on my back. "I'm not opening it," he said, more to me than to Travis. No matter what. Outside, the footsteps slowed, then stopped. The knob jiggled, just once. Testing. I surged forward, let out one single bark, deep, sharp, and final. Silence followed. Then the sound of retreating boots. Frank waited, counting breaths. Finally, he exhaled. "That's not going to be the last time, is it?" I stayed at the door until the sun climbed halfway up the sky. Later that afternoon, Frank sat me down in the living room. He held a small bundle of papers, stuff from my service file. I knew it by the scent of ink and dust, and old hands that had passed it from one desk to another. "They trained you to act," he said softly, "not to hesitate, not to ask." I watched him. "I don't want to lose you to some courtroom because you did what I couldn't." I rested my chin on his knee. "You know the line, don't you?" he asked. "The line between protecting and punishing." Yes. I knew it too well. "I'm not asking you to hold back," he continued. "I'm just asking you to wait, until there's no doubt." He was trying to protect me. Even now. Even knowing I was the only thing standing between him and real danger. That night, we didn't sleep much. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind, I was there, watching. And when the knock came again, this time past midnight, I was already standing. But it wasn't Travis. It was Deacon. His voice was lower, nervous. "Hey, you awake?" Frank didn't speak. Deacon continued. "He's planning something. I didn't sign up for this, man. He's talking about doing something big." Frank stepped closer to the door. "Why are you telling me this?" A pause. "I don't know. Maybe because that dog, the way he looked at me, it felt like he already knew how this ends." I didn't move, didn't growl, just listened. "He's out tonight," Deacon said. "Somewhere. Said he needed gas and a distraction." Frank's jaw clenched. "You mean he's coming here?" "I don't know," Deacon replied. "Just be ready." And then he was gone. Frank turned toward me. "Distraction?" I walked to the window, stared out into the night. Somewhere out there, Travis was setting the next step in motion. And I was done waiting. It wasn't fear that kept me awake that night. It was certainty. There's a difference, you know. Fear is the unknown creeping in through the cracks. Certainty is when the door is wide open, and you're staring straight into what's coming. I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd been afraid in deserts, in alleyways, in homes filled with smoke and screaming. This was something else. This was the moment before the strike. Frank didn't go back to sleep after Deacon's visit. He sat by the table, tracing the rim of his coffee mug with one finger. Not drinking, just listening. I sat beneath the window, eyes fixed on the alley behind the building. No movement yet, no scent on the wind, but I could feel it, like a thunderstorm sitting just past the ridge. "Chase," Frank said quietly, "if something happens, I won't get in your way, but I need you to be smart. Promise me that." I looked up at him, then rested my head on the toe of his boot. We waited. Hours passed. At some point, Frank dozed in the chair, his head leaned back, mouth slightly open, breathing slow and heavy. The city outside had gone silent, the kind of silence that only comes in the hour just before dawn, when even the drunks have gone home and the birds haven't started singing yet. That's when the lights flickered. Not a full blackout, just a quick pulse. A heartbeat skipped, then again, and then came the smell. It hit me like a memory. Gasoline, not fresh, not poured, carried, on skin, on clothes. I stood, walked to the door, slow and steady. Frank stirred, rubbed his eyes. "What is it?" I growled low, not loud, just enough to wake the air. Then the scratching came, at the back window, same as before, but this time it wasn't curious, it was deliberate. Frank stood slowly, grabbed the bat. He didn't speak, just nodded once. I moved to the front door, positioned myself. The window behind us rattled. Then, a crash, glass breaking. Frank flinched, stepped back, but no one came through. I turned, smoke, not fire, yet. But the haze creeping in from the broken pane told me enough. They weren't trying to break in, they were trying to flush us out. Frank coughed, pulled his shirt over his nose. "Back hallway," he said, pointing with the bat. "If it gets worse, we'll go." I moved first, cleared each room, just like I used to, nose low, body tight. Then I heard them, voices, outside, not shouting, whispering. They were watching. Frank stood near the bedroom window, still too far to smell what I could, but his instincts had caught up. "This isn't random," he said. "He's testing us." Then a knock, but not at the door, on the window. Soft, rhythmic. I lunged to the glass, front paws against the sill. There he was, Travis, just outside, standing in the glow of a street lamp, like a ghost that finally decided to show its face. He smiled, raised 2 fingers to his forehead in a mock salute. I didn't bark. I just stared. He didn't move closer, didn't shout, just stood there, watching. Behind him, I saw movement, shadows, too many. Frank stepped beside me. Is it him? I didn't need to answer. What's he doing? He was showing us. This wasn't about scaring anymore. This was about control. Frank pulled his phone, called Nolan. Don't send a car, he said. Send a unit. Within 10 minutes, red and blue flashed against the walls. But Travis was already gone. Gone like a scent on the wind, but not forgotten. The officers searched the block, found nothing but fresh footprints in the dirt behind the building and the smell of gasoline near the trash cans. One of them looked shaken, the younger one. What do you think he wanted? Frank didn't answer. He just put a hand on my head. The officer looked at me. That dog doesn't blink, does he? He blinks, Frank said. He just doesn't forget. They left. We stayed up. Morning came slow. Pale light through dirty windows. Coffee that didn't taste right. Even the birds outside seemed quieter. Frank sat on the couch, exhausted. This isn't going to stop on its own. He was right. That night we moved the couch in front of the door. I stayed awake, eyes fixed on the street below. I knew what was coming. He'd tested the curtain. Next time he'd step through it, and I'd be waiting. I used to think the warrior part of me had been buried the day I left the unit, folded up like an old uniform and tucked away in a wooden box that no one wanted to open. Civilian life, they called it. Retired, peaceful, soft around the edges. But war leaves a print on you, not always loud, but permanent, a shape in the bone. And when the time comes, it doesn't ask, it just wakes up. After the window shattered and Travis disappeared into the dark, the world around us shrank. The apartment didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a checkpoint. Frank moved slower. Double-locked the doors, kept the blinds down during the day. He spoke less, smiled less. But what changed most was the look in his eyes. Not the ones that had gone dark long ago, but the kind behind them. The way his voice shifted when he said my name. One morning, he reached out to buckle my harness before we stepped out. His hand paused halfway. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending this is going to blow over. I pressed against him gently. We walked the back way, down the alley, through the church parking lot, cutting behind the library where the bushes were high enough to give some cover. Every few steps, I stopped to listen, to smell. I could feel them. Not every day, not every hour, but they were still nearby. Once, I caught a whiff of Travis's leather jacket, hanging in the air like smoke from a long dead fire. Another time, a faint scuff mark near the stairs. Too fresh to be coincidence. Their presence lingered like a wolf at the edge of a pasture. Frank stopped going out unless I went with him. He stopped answering phone numbers he didn't recognize, started keeping a flashlight by the door, even in the daytime. Nolan came by twice, promised extra patrols, but he knew, like I knew, there weren't enough badges in this town to cover what was coming. That night, it changed. It started small. A distant bang, somewhere near the edge of the block. Fireworks, maybe. Or so it seemed. But the way my spine stiffened said otherwise. Frank sat up in bed. That didn't sound right. I was already on my feet. Then a siren, short, then cut. Power blinked. Once, twice, then stayed on. Frank gripped the edge of the bed. Chase? I moved to the front door, sat, waited. Footsteps outside. Not hurried, not panicked, purposeful. Then came a voice. A stranger's this time, but it carried the same poison. Hey, blind man. You still hiding behind that mutt? Frank stood slowly, bare feet on cold wood. Don't open it, I warned him, with my body. I wasn't going to, he whispered. More footsteps. At least 3 sets now. Maybe 4. Shifting just out of sight. Waiting for a trigger. Frank reached for the bat. Not the small one. The heavy wooden one he kept under the bed, meant for home runs, not hallway fights. I stood beside him, head low, muscles taut. Remember what you were trained for, he said. He wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to me. In that moment, I wasn't a pet. I wasn't a guide dog. I wasn't even retired. I was back in the vest, back in the headset, back in the doorframe of some run-down building, listening for breath behind drywall. I was back. The knock came hard this time. 2 thuds. No pause. Frank didn't flinch. Then a boot hit the door. The frame groaned but held. Frank's grip tightened on the bat. I stepped forward, growled. Not to warn, to claim. 1 more kick. Then silence. No words. No threats. Just the kind of quiet that happens when someone realizes the line's about to break. A voice finally called out. Deacon. I told him not to, he said. I told him this was stupid. Frank pressed his ear to the door. Deacon? Yeah, the voice said. I tried to stop him. He ain't listening to anybody. He's drunk. He's not thinking straight. Frank looked toward me. He's not alone. No, Deacon admitted. There's 2 others with him. But listen, he's got a can of something. He's talking about lighting it, like it's a joke, like it don't matter. Frank's face didn't change, but his hand dropped to my collar. Not in fear, in readiness. Chase, he whispered. If he lights it. He didn't finish. Outside, a flick, then a pause. I knew that sound. A lighter. Then another voice. Travis. Loud. Slurred. You ever see a dog jump through fire? Frank's hand trembled. They're gonna try to burn us out. That was it. That was the moment. The warrior inside me stood up. And not the dog, not the pet, the K9. I moved fast, quicker than I'd moved in months. I barreled toward the window overlooking the alley, caught sight of them, a bottle, a rag, flame just catching the edge. Frank shouted behind me. I didn't wait. I charged the door, hit it with my full weight. It cracked but didn't give. Again, wood split. Hinges groaned. Again, it burst open. They didn't expect that. I saw Travis first, bottle in hand, eyes wide. Then the others, frozen, unsure. I didn't attack, not yet. I stood in the doorway, teeth bared, body low, every inch of me saying, you move, you bleed. Travis took a step back. You crazy mutt, he spat. He raised the bottle. Then Nolan's cruiser screeched around the corner. Lights, sirens, a command barked through a megaphone. Drop it now! I didn't move. Travis did. He dropped the bottle. It hit the pavement and rolled, flame fizzling out. The officers swarmed in. Frank appeared behind me, breathing hard. It's over, he said. But it wasn't. Not for me, because in that moment, I realized the warrior in me wasn't gone. He'd just been waiting for the right reason to come back. And Frank? He was my reason. There's a difference between a man who pushes limits and a man who doesn't know they exist. I've met both. In the field, that difference can get you killed. Out here, on the streets of a sleepy town, it can still do the same. Just slower, quieter, with more smoke and fewer headlines. After that night, the flames, the sirens, the barked commands, we didn't speak much. Not because we didn't need to, but because the air was already full of words we hadn't said. Frank didn't ask what I saw in Travis's eyes. He didn't need to. He knew. It wasn't about rage. It wasn't even about winning. It was about proving something. That's the kind of man Travis was. And that's the kind of man who doesn't stop when he's caught. He just gets smarter, meaner. They didn't press charges. Not really. Frank gave a statement. Nolan wrote up the incident, but no one was hurt, and Travis's lawyer said the fire was never lit. Just a threat, an empty gesture. He called it a misunderstanding. I call it a warning. Travis vanished for a few days after that. His scent didn't show up near the building. The street felt lighter. But I didn't ease up. I couldn't. And neither did Frank. He started carrying a small canister of pepper spray in his jacket. Kept the baseball bat by the door, always. And every night, before he locked up, he'd say aloud, "We're good. We're okay. Just for tonight. Just for tonight." Then, one morning, it happened. We were walking down Hawthorne Street, the way we always did. The sun was out, and the bakery had that cinnamon smell drifting from the vents. For a second, it felt like the world might actually be soft again. Frank even joked. "You think we'll get lucky and they'll be giving out samples today?" I gave him a small grunt, nudged his leg. We were halfway to the corner when I heard it. A single boot scuff. Fast. Close. I turned just in time to see a figure coming around the alley. Hood up, shoulders hunched, one hand tucked behind his back. Everything in me clicked into place. I stepped in front of Frank. Growled low. The man stopped. Frank tensed. "What is it?" Then the figure stepped into full view. Travis? He was alone. No smirk this time. No swagger. But his eyes, they still had that same fire. The kind that burns down barns, just to watch the smoke rise. Frank's voice sharpened. "Turn around. Now." Travis didn't move. "Didn't come to fight," he said. "Just came to talk." I didn't believe him. Neither did Frank. "We're done talking," Frank said. "Go home." "I don't have a home," Travis replied. He stepped forward. I growled again, took a half step toward him. He froze. Smiled a little. "Always protecting, huh?" "You're damn right," Frank snapped. Then Travis reached into his coat. It was fast. Too fast. I lunged. My shoulder slammed into his chest before he could pull whatever it was. He fell backward onto the pavement with a grunt. I stood over him, growling louder now, lips peeled back. He didn't move, didn't reach, just lay there, staring up at me. "Okay," he muttered. "Okay, I get it." Frank called out. "What's in your jacket?" "Nothing," Travis said quickly. "Just my wallet." "Show it," Frank demanded. Travis reached slowly, pulled it out, tossed it toward Frank's voice. "Happy?" he spat. Frank stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "You crossed a line. You know that?" Travis pushed himself up to sit, rubbed his ribs. "Didn't plan on hurting anybody." I stood over him, unmoving. He looked at me. "You're different," he said. "Not just trained. You look through people." I didn't blink. "You remember everything, don't you?" he asked. "Every time I showed up. Every time I laughed. Every time I tested you." "Yes. Guess I failed the test, huh?" he muttered. Frank stepped closer. "You want to fix this? Then leave. For good." Travis didn't respond, just stood, brushed dirt from his jeans. Then he walked away. No fight. No final word. Just silence. But I didn't let my guard down. Because a man like Travis doesn't end things with silence. He ends them with smoke. With chaos. With one last, desperate swing. Back at home, Frank locked the door behind us. He stood there for a long time, one hand on the deadbolt, breathing slow and heavy. Then he knelt beside me. "I've had a lot of people look out for me, Chase," he said. "But no one's ever stood between me and a man like that." I lowered my head into his hands. "I don't know what happens next," he whispered. "But I know I'm not facing it alone." Later that night, the apartment was still. The world outside had quieted again. But I stayed near the door, eyes on the hallway, because the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. You spend most of your life thinking you know who you are. For me, I was always a tool, a trained weapon, a badge with fur. I was raised to obey, to strike when told, to stay silent in chaos and focused in noise. I didn't ask why. I didn't wonder what came after. My job was to act, to protect, to survive. But that was before Frank, before the quiet walks and the warm mornings with coffee steam rising like breath on a cold day. Before the sound of his voice became something more than a command to follow. Before his fingers, rough and certain, rested on my head not as a signal, but as a comfort. I don't know the moment it changed. I only know it had. The next time Travis came, it wasn't in the middle of the night. It was broad daylight, just before noon. Frank and I were returning from the pharmacy, his bag swinging lightly in his hand, mine full of the smell of gauze, antiseptic, and the plastic crinkle of pill bottles. It was a calm day, even warm for that time of year. But I knew something was wrong the moment we turned onto Pine Street. There were no birds, no traffic, just stillness. Then I saw him, leaning against the front of the building, hands in his pockets, like he belonged there. His face didn't carry that usual smugness anymore. It was tighter, focused. There was something behind his eyes I hadn't seen before. Desperation. Frank paused. He sensed it too. "Is someone there?" I moved between him and the street. "Travis?" he asked, voice steady. No answer. Just a half step forward. I could hear gravel crunch beneath his boot. "Whatever you're thinking, don't," Frank warned. "I'm not here for you," Travis said, voice low. "I'm here for him." He pointed at me. Frank's jaw clenched. "He's not yours to challenge." Travis's hands twitched in his coat pockets. "I can't let it go. I see him when I close my eyes. That stare, that warning. I ain't slept right since." "You brought that on yourself," Frank said. "No." Travis shook his head. "He did. He humiliated me. In front of my boys. In front of everyone." His voice cracked at the end. And for a brief second, I saw the truth. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at what I reminded him of. Weakness. Frank started backing up. "We're going inside." "No, you're not," Travis snapped. His hand came out of his pocket fast, Metal flashing. A knife. Frank froze. And in that moment, everything slowed. I didn't think. I didn't calculate like I used to. I chose. I chose Frank. I chose this life. I chose something more than orders and instincts. I lunged. The world exploded into motion. My body collided with his. Hard. We both hit the ground. The knife skittered across the sidewalk. Travis shouted, tried to kick me off. I stayed on top of him, teeth bared, not biting, yet, but pressing down, pinning him like I had done 100 times before. Only this time, it wasn't for a team. It wasn't for a mission. It was for us. For me. Frank called my name. Chase. Let go. But I didn't. Not yet. Not until I saw Travis's face. His eyes wide, full of something deeper than fear. Understanding. I released. He didn't move. Didn't try to run. Just lay there, staring up at the sky, like he was waiting for something to take him away. Then the sirens came. Again. Nolan's voice echoed down the block. Chase. Heel. I stepped back. Officers surrounded Travis. Hands cuffed. Knife bagged. No resistance. Frank knelt beside me. His hand found my collar, gripping it like it was a lifeline. You okay, buddy? I pressed my head into his chest. Nolan walked over. He came at you? Frank nodded. With a blade. Nolan exhaled. Good thing he didn't get past the dog. Frank didn't speak, just held me tighter. Later, back at the apartment, after the paperwork, after the apologies, after the thank yous from neighbors who had watched from behind their windows, Frank sat down on the couch with a groan. You saved my life. I rested beside him, tail wagging once. Slow, certain. He looked down at me. You didn't wait for a command. No, I didn't. Good, he whispered. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't weigh you down, but lifts you up. I realized in that moment I wasn't just his dog. I wasn't just his protector. I was his partner. And somewhere deep inside me, the part that had always waited for someone else to say, go, finally said, I'm already there. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Tool, asset, K9, hero, even menace once or twice. Some called me a good boy without meaning it, and others never said a word but gave me a glance that said everything. But no one, not until Frank, ever looked at me like I belonged. Not just in the room, not just in the mission, but in the world. It's funny how you don't realize what you're missing until someone gives it to you. After Travis was taken away that day, something in the air changed. I could feel it in Frank's bones when he exhaled deeper than I'd heard in months. I could feel it in the way the neighbors lingered outside longer, waving instead of ducking their heads. It was like the town itself had been holding its breath. And finally let go. Travis pled guilty. Some kind of deal, intent to cause harm, weapon possession. No one got hurt, so the judge didn't throw the book at him. But he was gone. And we all knew he wouldn't be back. We weren't afraid anymore. Not in the same way. But fear isn't the only thing that lingers. Sometimes, peace does too. Frank's walks became longer. He stopped taking the bat by the door. Started greeting folks again. There were even a couple afternoons he took out the old folding chair and sat out front, sun on his face, like a man trying to remember what it felt like to live. One of those afternoons, he looked down at me and said, "You've done more for me than anyone ever has, Chase." I didn't wag. Didn't need to. I just stayed by his side. A week later, Nolan came by. He stood on the porch, a folder in his hand, and a look on his face like he wasn't sure if this was good news or something heavier. Frank opened the door. "Something wrong?" "No," Nolan said. "Actually, I think you'll like this." Frank took the folder. Inside was a letter. It was from the department. They wanted to recognize me. Me, not the unit I came from. Not the handlers who'd logged my hours. Just me. They'd written about the incident with Travis. About how I'd protected a civilian. About how I'd acted independently, without command, and prevented potential harm. They were offering me a service medal. I don't think Frank breathed for a full minute. He sat down, letter still in hand, and just stared at me. "You know they don't do this for dogs," he whispered, but they were doing it. 2 weeks later, we were standing in front of the courthouse. A small ceremony, local press, a couple kids with sticky fingers and wide eyes, pointing at me like I was something out of a movie. I stood still the whole time. Frank wore a suit. I wore nothing. Just me, as I was. When they pinned the medal to a small velvet pillow and handed it to Frank, he didn't cry. But his voice cracked when he spoke. "He's not just a protector," he said. "He's my partner. He's my family." I looked up at him, and I knew that word, family. It wasn't about blood. It wasn't about species. It wasn't even about how long you'd known someone. It was about showing up, about staying when things got hard, about choosing someone again and again, even when you didn't have to. Frank chose me, and I chose him. As years passed, we got older, slower. Frank started needing a cane. I started sleeping more. My bones ached in the mornings, and stairs became more of a negotiation than a sprint. But we were still together. One summer afternoon, he sat out back on the porch, the sun painting gold across his skin. I rested my head on his foot, eyes half closed. "You ever wonder," he said softly, "why we ended up in each other's lives?" I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. He smiled. "I think it's because God knew I couldn't do this alone. And maybe you couldn't either." I sighed, slow and long, the way you do when you feel full, of love, of time, of stories. I don't know how many more seasons I'll see. My body tells me not many. But I'm not afraid. Not anymore. Because I was more than a dog. I was a soldier, a protector, a friend. And in the end, I was his. And he was mine. Family doesn't have to look alike. It just has to hold on. And we did. All the way home. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you were waiting for someone to see you for who you really are, just type 1 in the comments. You don't have to say more than that. I'll understand. I might be just an old dog, but this story came from a place real deep inside me. And if it touched something in you too, well, maybe we aren't so different. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to stick around. I've got a few more stories left in these old bones. Stories about love, loyalty, and the quiet kind of bravery. And when you're ready, I'll be right here, waiting to share them with you. Thank you for walking this road with me.